Gods not only take the forms of animals or people to represent behavior, they are often associated with energies such as storms, earthquakes, and the movements within our cosmos, such as stars and planets. So when you find yourself questioning characters who are larger than life, don't fall into the trap of believing it's entirely fiction, because naught is all as it seems. Let's take the tale of Nyx from the Greek creation myth. In the beginning, there was an empty darkness. The only thing in this void was Nyx, a bird with black wings. With the wind, she laid a golden egg, and for ages she sat upon this egg. It is difficult to understand meaning in this unless you understand what is really being represented here. And uncovering the basis of what makes up these characters brings an entirely new appreciation of what these stories intended to say. It is also important, as discussed in my previous video, to know which tales are of creation and which are of recreation. Because of the countless similarities of Nyx to Genesis, and the stories of the Hopi, Aztecs, and Australian Aboriginals, Nyx is a tale of recreation. So if we take this story and replace the characters and objects with their attributes, a new understanding emerges. It began with uncertainty. The only thing that existed was an energy, with the ominous power of the wind. With the wind, a new age and world were born, and for a long time, the ominous wind dominated this world. When broken down, these gods portray much more than what they offer up at face value. But what does this character have in common besides the wind, which connected to other stories about this particular moment in time? Born of chaos, Nyx is the goddess who brought night to the human race, and in its wake gave birth to the day. This god is also associated with the beginning of time, and the moonstone is used to honor her. So in short, she is given to us as a powerful deity who introduced the first night, the moon, gave us a 24-hour cycle, and in turn allowed the human race to prosper. And what this god represents is replicated in many other areas. Exaggerations have been one of the major issues in decoding these narratives. But if you open up what these exaggerations represent, they paint a pretty clear picture. In the earliest accounts of Cataclysm, the wind is associated with wiping out other inhabitants before humanity is allowed to thrive. These tales of wind are connected to monkeys, giants, the beginning of the first sunset and sunrise, the alteration of lands and seas on Earth through vibration, and the tilt of our planet. So when we hear the Aztecs tell of giants, the ancients of India speaking of civilized monkeys, or the Hopi talking about ant people, it is easy to set them aside as some bizarre and unrelated tellings from a people who allowed their imaginations to create fictional stories lacking any truth. But when given an honest look, as we did with Nyx, these gods and creatures tell us something we otherwise wouldn't see if we took them merely for their embellished words alone. And perhaps this is just the fault of time itself, which gave rise to these characters to having the least amount of words in order for them to envelop a broader meaning. But before we begin, it is important that you wipe away any thoughts that you have about giants, people being turned into monkeys, and giant birds birthing worlds, and stop for a moment to think about what these words represent and what the ancient storytellers really meant for us to see. The Popol Vuh speaks of a wind being the last of the gods who discussed the creation of the earth. The Hopi First World describes a time when Sotunang uses the wind to arrange the world. They relate the creation of this wind to the planet spinning wildly because no one is guarding the poles. The Aztec second sun, which is also described as being the first sun to humans, is called the wind sun. It was birthed from the destruction of the first sun, which destroyed the so-called giants. Hanuman is an ancient god from India. He is half monkey, half human, and is born of the wind. There are also statues from Mexico of monkeys dressed in the garbs of the Aztec god of the wind. In an Australian Aboriginal tale, Bellin Bellin was a representation of the wind. After the creation of people and animals, he was instructed by his leader to wipe it all away with the power he had been given. This particular story is similar to Hippotes, the son of a giant and keeper of the winds. In Homer's Odyssey, Hippotes gave Odysseus a sealed bag which contained the wind. Believing it contained wealth, his friends opened it, unleashing the winds, which made their voyage back home take longer. Such is the story again with Nyx, who sat on the egg with the wind for ages, as well as the Hopi who lived underground with the ant people, who had to wait because it took a long time for the world to cool down. So the question with these specific stories becomes this: what kind of event transpired in order to create stories about the wind being responsible for the entire world changing, and it coming from cultures so vastly far apart? The tale of Hanuman is quite interesting. It begins with a group of monkeys who had overpopulated an island. They begin daring each other about jumping over the sea to another land. One of them, called Hanuman, who was born of the wind, is said to have grown larger and larger before taking the leap. He is also associated with strength, energy, and wisdom. Being associated with these attributes could be a sign of a jump into human intelligence and a let go of our more primal selves. The wind is not only associated with Hanuman from India, but also with the giants of South American legend. The Aztecs stated that monkeys were devoured by jaguars. They also stated that the jaguar's son ended the reign of Quetzalcoatl, who ruled over the giants, and the people that survived were turned into monkeys. It's important to note that the jaguar represented the wind. So, do we believe these words at face value, that a gigantic people were turned into monkeys? So what's the real story here? In order to understand that, we have to look at what the other cultures had to say about this event. The other tales describe gods who not only turned people into monkeys, they also blew them away. More tell of a wind being so great that people seeking refuge climbed the mountains and scrambled up into trees. With all of these stories now into focus, is it not more clear that what occurred was an event so powerful that it forced the few people who survived into the mountains and woods? The connections of these stories from different parts of the world is staggering. But it doesn't end there. These tales have more than the wind associated with them. But the wind is a major connector, because it is the description of what this particular cataclysm consisted of. And it is a means to sort this particular event from the others. In Genesis, God creates the first night and day. He arranges the waters on earth and makes dry land appear. And from the dust and ground, he breathes life into Adam. This idea of breathing life into humans and animals and arranging lands is prevalent in many of these stories. It is also mentioned in a previous passage that before man was created, a wind blew over the waters. In creation stories, water is seen as a primordial substance which created our universe. Therefore, the wind would also be seen in a similar sort. But if Genesis is a recreation story, and thus far is showing itself to be, then the wind blowing over the waters must be seen in a different light. And since the passages offered in the Great Book often repeat themselves, placing them together gives an image of the wind arranging the world before the introduction of humanity. In Australia, Bunjil is a representation of a bird who created their country and controlled the winds through another god called Belin Belin, similar to the Greek creation story of Nyx who blew wind on the world. Bunjil is also stated as creating people by breathing life into molded clay. The Hopi Four Worlds legend also states that the forces of air arranged the lands before the introduction of modern people. Many of the words for breathing in ancient times were associated and in some cases the same word for the wind. In the Aztec 5 suns, the wind sun is in relation to the destruction of one world, which ushered in modern man. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the sun god is said to have raised mighty winds. So do we literally believe that life was created from blowing breath on the ground? Or do we take it as a time when a great wind changed the landscape of the earth, destroying a species who were once prominent and ushering in a new one due to change? Waters, as we've already discussed, are viewed as a primordial substance during the creation of our known universe. Void is seen as a vacant space in which these primordial waters flowed. But chaos is a descriptor of something that is without balance and rules and is accurate for both contexts. In short, while the words used for creation can be accepted as an empty space that existed as flowing energies ran boundless, these boundless energies mean the very same thing when involving them in recreation stories. Nyx, who sat on the world with the wind, was born from the goddess of chaos. In the ancient Egyptian creation story, the earth was created out of chaos by the god Adam, whose father represented the wind. In the Hopi's first world, the wind is created before the introduction of the first two people. These twins are sent to the poles to stabilize the earth because it was spinning out of control. The Aztecs tell of hurricanes during a chaotic transition, which seen the death of one species and the emergence of another. And again, all of these are associated with the wind. If we look at their representations and remove the exaggerations, what do these tales tell us about this particular moment in time? The moon is introduced. A dominant species of man and animals comes to an end, while the earth spins out of control. The planet vibrates and strong winds blow, while land and oceans change. The wind continues to blow for a long time, then calms. Night and day are born as a result, and humans become the new dominant species. This is part of the actual story told to us in the imaginative tellings of an ancient people who wanted this time not to be forgotten. Please keep in mind that as we go on with this series of the first Cataclysm, we will be uncovering in more detail information about the destruction of the giants, the first night, the introduction of the moon, and the destabilization of the Earth's axis. Many believe these stories only refer to the movements of stars and planetary bodies in our solar system. But these legends and myths are a combination. They are a combination of what was happening to our planet, the effects these events had on the people and animals, and what was occurring in the sky during that time. It is the reason why numerous stories contain gods who have so many attributes contained within them, as well as the involvement of other gods in the same tale. In these specific tales, The wind changed the landscape of the earth. It is used to describe the means of the end of one people, and is planted right before the creation of another. So whether these stories have been purposefully embellished or not, their colorful representations have ensured they have lasted the test of time.